The day I was wheeled into surgery, Sophia posted a photo in her wedding dress. Not in the hospital, not beside me, but under a floral arch with my cousin Phillips. Her smile was soft, rehearsed, almost holy. His hand rested on her waist like it had always belonged there. The caption read, "Life gives second chances to those who deserve them." I stared at the image from my hospital bed, tubes in my arm, kidneys failing, breath shallow from the morphine. And I didn't feel pain. Not right away. Just a slow, steady numbness like drowning in slow motion. 3 hours before that photo went up, I had signed over my medical power of attorney to her. She'd kissed my forehead, told me everything would be okay, promised to be there when I woke up. And I believed her, because Sophia was my wife. Because love, even when abused, still clings like frostbite. But I woke up to silence, no voice calling my name. No warmth in the chair beside me. Only an exhausted nurse who whispered, "Your wife? She left just after you were sedated." For the next few days, the world moved around me. IV drips, nurses walking in and out, the stale taste of metal in my mouth, bills piling up, and not a single visitor. I had spent 7 years building a life with her, and now, while I fought to survive with one kidney, she threw a wedding with the man I used to call brother. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I waited. I healed. And then I called my lawyer. Sophia didn't know I had legally transferred the entire hospital debt into her name the day before the procedure. She didn't know I'd left a final gift inside the wedding envelope she would open days later. And she definitely didn't know that the man she married had forged my signature on a second mortgage, one I'd never repay. Frank never looked like a man built for war, but life made one out of him anyway. At 34, his frame had already thinned from months of dialysis, but his eyes, deep, sunken, and impossibly focused, never lost their edge. Even lying in a hospital bed, hooked to machines that hummed like clockwork, he had the presence of someone who remembered too much and trusted too little. Before all of this, before the betrayal, the blood tests, the painkillers, Frank lived quietly. A civil engineer by trade, he didn't chase headlines or flex wealth. He built structures that could outlast storms. The irony wasn't lost on him. He could reinforce bridges against earthquakes, but never saw the cracks in his own marriage. He met Sophia at a corporate fundraiser 5 years ago. She was luminous that night. Light brown hair pinned into a bun, a silk champagne gown that glimmered under the chandelier, and a laugh that sounded like confidence disguised as charm. She worked in branding, handled elite clientele, and always spoke like the world needed her approval to breathe. Frank had been drawn to her quiet power. She in turn seemed fascinated by his restraint. Where other men peacocked with their titles and watches, Frank stood silently, hands in his pockets, analyzing the steel archway of the venue ceiling like it held secrets more interesting than any guest in the room. 2 years later, they were married. Their wedding was not extravagant, but elegant. A vineyard in autumn, vows under fading daylight. Just enough guests to fill the photographs, but not enough to feel suffocated. Phillips, Frank's cousin, was the best man, laughing loudly, charming the bridesmaids, giving a speech that earned too many claps. Frank didn't notice then how closely he and Sophia danced that night. In hindsight, he noticed everything. At first, the marriage was functional, even beautiful. Sophia managed their social calendar. Frank handled their finances. He built her a custom walk-in closet with cedar-paneled shelving and soft golden lighting. She once cried when he unveiled it, called him her quiet miracle. But something changed when his health began to decline. It started with fatigue, then nausea, then fainting in the shower. Sophia scheduled appointments, but her voice always had a tinge of inconvenience when she asked how he was doing. When the diagnosis came, stage 4 kidney failure, Sophia's reaction was too measured. She hugged him without squeezing, kissed his temple like she was comforting a coworker, not a husband. Frank remembered lying in bed that night, watching her, scroll through her phone, face lit by a cold glow. He asked her, "Are you scared?" She didn't look up. "No. We'll get through it." "We?" She nodded, but she never met his eyes. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital corridors and insurance calls. Sophia was there physically, signing waivers, talking to nurses, but Frank couldn't feel her anymore. It was like she'd put their marriage in a glass case, something she could admire but never touch. One night, as he lay in the hospital, recovering from a collapsed vein, he overheard her in the hallway. She was on the phone with someone. Her voice was low, intimate, soft laughter, then silence. Then, "I can't talk long. He's awake." Frank said nothing when she walked in, just closed his eyes, let her believe he hadn't heard a thing. He told himself he was paranoid. Sick people think too much, doubt too easily. But then came the real proof. On his tablet, still logged into the shared cloud, a photo appeared. A mirror selfie. Sophia in a fitted black dress. Beside her, Phillips in a suit, his hand on her lower back. They were in a hotel suite. Frank stared at the image for a full minute, blinking once. Then again. He didn't react immediately, didn't confront her. Instead, he called his lawyer the next morning and started the process of shifting his medical debts into her name. Legally, quietly, with full documentation. He also began closing accounts, ones Sophia didn't even know existed. Frank had always prepared for worst-case scenarios. He was an engineer, after all. He called it risk management, not revenge. That same week, Phillips visited him in the hospital, brought a bottle of cheap red wine and tried to pretend like he hadn't vanished. For months, he laughed too loud, wore cologne that reeked of expensive guilt. Frank had watched him talk, smile, ramble on about the news, his mouth moving like a used car salesman. He didn't say anything about Sophia. Didn't have to. Frank just smiled, thanked him for the visit, and said nothing. When he was stable enough to walk again, he discharged himself against medical advice, went home alone. Sophia had left for a business trip. Frank packed 3 boxes, clothes, documents, a sealed envelope labeled, "To the happy couple." It contained the medical bill, a statement for over $137,000, with Sophia listed as the financial guarantor. He dropped it off the day before their wedding, quietly, without a return address. Then he disappeared. Frank hadn't planned on returning to the city so soon. After leaving Sophia and Phillips behind, he spent 3 weeks in a rehabilitation center on the outskirts of town. No nameplate on the gate, no visitors allowed. He needed quiet, not comfort. The kind of silence that lets you hear your own breath again. But on a rainy Thursday afternoon, he got a call from the billing department. Not his doctor, not a friend. A billing coordinator. "Mr. Frank Willoughby?" the voice said. "This is to confirm that the payment method on file for your nephrectomy procedure was changed. We just need final confirmation from your wife." Frank smiled slowly. "I don't have a wife." A pause. "Oh, it says here, Sophia Willoughby is the listed guarantor. Her signature is already on the invoice." He thanked them and hung up. He knew Sophia hadn't seen it yet. She must have signed blindly, trusting the clipboard, not reading the fine print. And now, for the first time since the betrayal, Frank allowed himself one full breath of satisfaction. He returned to the city that night, not to confront her, not yet, but to watch. The first place he went was Phillips's new penthouse, a top-floor condo purchased with Frank's former home equity, illegally mortgaged with his forged signature. Sophia had to co-sign to clean up the mess Phillips left behind after his last investment failure. Frank had discovered it months ago while combing through their joint financial accounts in silence. And instead of reporting it, he let it slide. He wanted them to feel comfortable, safe, oblivious. Now standing across the street in a parked car, he watched the lights flicker behind their balcony window. Laughter, music, shadows dancing past the curtains. He thought of the last time he and Sophia slow danced, her hands clasped behind his neck, whispering how she couldn't imagine life without him. That had been a month before his first dialysis. Frank got out of the car and made his way toward the building's side entrance. He had no key, but the concierge recognized him. Everyone always did. He nodded politely and stepped into the elevator, stopping just one floor below theirs. He didn't need to go in. Just stand there. Just listen. The elevator pinged. Doors opened. Voices floated down the stairwell. "Did you get the spa deposit returned?" Sophia's voice, crisp, annoyed. "I told you I'd call them tomorrow," Phillips replied, laughing softly. "Well, you'd better," she snapped. "We don't have the money to throw around anymore. Not with the hospital hounding me about that ridiculous bill." Frank felt his jaw tighten. Phillips laughed again. "Relax. We'll settle it with your family trust, or just ignore them. What are they going to do? Repo your kidney?" "You're not funny, Phillips," she muttered. "That procedure was for Frank. I should have never signed anything." Frank stepped back into the shadows, disappearing down the hall as their voices faded behind a door. The next day, Frank received a message on his old, unused backup phone. A number he hadn't given out in years. Only one person still remembered it. Leah, his friend from university. They'd stayed loosely in touch over the years, brief check-ins, birthday messages. But she'd always been in the background of his life, watching from a distance. She wrote, "I heard what happened. I know you're alive. I never believed the headlines. If you need anything, just say the word." Frank stared at the message for a long time. Then he replied, "I need to disappear. Not forever. Just long enough." Leah answered within seconds. "Come stay at my cabin. No one will find you there." So he did. The cabin was quiet, just outside of Vermont. 2 bedrooms, a stocked kitchen, and a fireplace that crackled like it remembered secrets. Frank spent his days walking trails, taking slow breaths, and rebuilding a body that had spent a year falling apart. Leah was warm, soft-spoken, and never asked questions he wasn't ready to answer. She didn't pity him, didn't press. She simply existed beside him, a presence without pressure, and Frank began to feel his insides thaw. But peace never lasts when you leave enemies behind. One morning, as he sipped his coffee by the window, Leah entered with her phone in hand. "You're trending," she said quietly, placing the screen in front of him. Frank's name was all over social media, not for the surgery, not for vanishing, but for abandoning his wife during her hour of need. Sophia had posted a carefully lit video of herself crying in front of a mountain of debt collection letters, saying, "I stood by my husband during his illness," and, "Now he's vanished, leaving me with everything. I never wanted this pain. I just wanted to love him. Please understand." Frank watched the video in silence. He didn't flinch, didn't laugh, just sipped his coffee and whispered, "She's good. I'll give her that." Leah watched him. "Are you going to respond?" "No," he said, "but I will return." Frank had always been the type of man who thought emotions were best kept folded, like clean shirts in a drawer. Out of sight, controlled, predictable. But now, sitting at Leah's cabin with the fire slowly dying and his name twisted across every gossip headline, something in him began to uncoil. He couldn't sleep. Not because of the noise. There was none. Not because of pain. He was healing. But because in the silence his memories screamed louder than ever. Sophia's voice echoed in pieces. "You're overthinking, Frank. I just need space. Phillips is like family to both of us." Each phrase landed like a dull blade, not sharp enough to kill, just enough to bleed slowly. He stared out the window, watching the mist rise off the trees, trying to piece together where it all broke. Was it the day he was diagnosed? The day she stopped checking in during his appointments? The way she stopped wearing her wedding ring, subtle at first, then obvious? Or maybe it was always there, and he'd just been too hopeful. Leah knocked, gently one evening, holding out a mug of warm tea. She didn't speak. She never did unless he asked. Frank took the mug, nodded his thanks, and sat beside her on the porch swing. He wanted to say something. He tried, but the words got stuck in his throat. Shame, confusion, grief. It all came rushing up, burning behind his ribs. He gripped the armrest of the swing like it was the only thing keeping him from unraveling. "It's not the betrayal," he finally said. "It's that I knew. Somewhere inside, I knew. And I still let it happen." Leah didn't respond right away, just rocked slowly beside him. "You loved her," she said quietly. "People in love lie to themselves more beautifully than anyone else." Frank let the silence return. The next day, his phone lit up with a new alert. His old email account, untouched for weeks. It was a forwarded document from a hospital in Sophia's name. Final balance due, $137,211.97. Below it, another message from Phillips. Subject, "We need to talk." Message, "I know what you did. Let's be men and settle this." Frank didn't respond, but the dread began crawling under his skin again. He knew Phillips wouldn't take this loss quietly. He'd never had to pay for consequences in his life, the type of man who stumbled out of fires others put out for him. And now, burned, he'd lash back. Leah watched him read the message. "You're afraid?" she said. "No," Frank whispered. "I'm preparing." But truthfully, fear was there. Not fear for himself, he'd already faced death and walked away, but fear that the story might twist. That Sophia would spin a perfect narrative. That people would believe the crying bride over the quiet man who disappeared. That maybe the court would too. Frank knew Phillips had influence, connections. And he also knew that Sophia had taken out a secondary line of credit using his forged signature. He gathered the documents again. Cross-checked everything. Dates, amounts, witnesses. Every time he touched the pages, his fingers trembled. Not from weakness, but from restraint. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want headlines. He just wanted to be done. And yet, the ache inside him refused to dissolve. He remembered the last time he and Sophia made dinner together. He'd been wearing his hospital wristband still. She'd laughed and told him to take it off, said it ruined the aesthetic of their date night. He'd been slicing tomatoes. She'd been on the phone, texting rapidly, smiling at a message she never showed him. When he asked what it was, she waved it off. Said it was work. It hadn't been. He remembered everything now. The shadows, the silence, the missing intimacy. He remembered her voice when she told him she had to travel for branding events, while Phillips just so happened to post from the same resort on his story. He remembered the nurse's face when she whispered that Sophia left the hospital just minutes after the anesthesia took hold. The cracks were there. He just refused to read them. And now, as Leah gently placed her hand on his and whispered, "You're allowed to be angry," Frank felt something twist loose in his chest. "I'm not angry," he said slowly. "I'm exhausted. I gave someone everything. And I wasn't just betrayed. I was discarded." A long silence passed. Then he stood, walked to the desk, pulled out the manila folder with every receipt, every signature, every message. He laid them out like puzzle pieces. And finally, for the first time since the hospital, Frank felt something steady forming behind his eyes. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. If Phillips wanted to talk, they would. If Sophia wanted to cry, she could. But if they thought the quiet man was going to stay quiet forever, they were mistaken. Frank's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't from Phillips. It was from an anonymous number, one image, no caption. Just Sophia, sitting across a lawyer's desk, visibly tense, a stack of documents in front of her. The watermark read, Wesley and Hartman Law Group, a firm Frank knew well, high profile, ruthless, bought loyalty, bought narratives. Frank stared at the image for a long time. Then, 15 minutes later, a letter arrived by email. Notice of civil litigation, defamation, fraud, emotional distress filed by Sophia Willoughby and Phillips Langston. They were suing him. Frank didn't blink. He just set the phone down and walked to the window. The snow had started again. Quiet, soft, relentless. They wanted to flip the narrative, frame him as unstable, accuse him of shifting debt maliciously, of abandoning his legal and emotional obligations as a husband. The words in the complaint were precise, surgical. Sophia had signed every page. Phillips, of course, had added a paragraph about emotional suffering and loss of reputation that made Frank actually laugh. The kind of low, bitter laugh that came from someone too tired to be angry anymore. But what stopped him cold wasn't the lawsuit itself. It was the clause in the affidavit. Phillips claimed that Frank had threatened him in person, referencing a confrontation in the parking garage the night before the wedding. Frank had never been there. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But if it stuck in court, if they sold the illusion well enough, it wouldn't just be defamation. They could spin it into a protective order, restrict movement, freeze assets. They were trying to corner him. Leah found him at the kitchen counter, gripping the edge so hard his knuckles turned white. "What happened?" she asked, stepping closer. Frank said nothing for a long time. Then quietly, "They're going to try to ruin me before I can ruin them." Her face changed. "What can I do?" He turned slowly, opened a drawer, and pulled out a flash drive. "This holds everything. Every forged document, every payment made under my name, every message Phillips ever sent me, thinking I'd never expose him." Leah took it, eyes wide. "You're going public?" "No." His voice was calm, cold. "I'm going nuclear." Frank called his own lawyer, Mr. Ronan Say, a man who didn't just know the law, he understood blood, war, retaliation. He sent Say everything, and while he waited for the counterclaim to be drawn up, he made one final visit, not to Sophia, not to Phillips, but to Sophia's mother. It was unexpected, but Frank knew where pressure broke most bones. The door opened slowly. Mrs. Valeria Willoughby looked older now, gray streaks in her once coal hair, stress etched around her eyes. She didn't slam the door in his face. She didn't smile either. "Frank, I won't stay long," he said simply. "I assume you're here about the lawsuit," she said coldly. "No," Frank replied. "I'm here to remind you that your daughter is about to expose your family's entire financial misconduct in court." She flinched. He continued, calm as a surgeon. "Your trust is entangled with hers. You co-signed the credit line Phillips took out. And if this goes public, the IRS will want a statement too." Valeria's mouth parted, but no words came. Frank leaned in slightly. "I didn't come to beg. I came to offer one chance. Make her drop the suit. Walk away, quietly. Or I will make every receipt part of public record. And your daughter won't just lose her name, she'll lose her freedom." She stared at him, breath shaking. "What do you want?" "I want the silence I earned," Frank said. "I want peace, and I want them gone." She shut the door without a word. The next morning, the court received a withdrawal notice. The lawsuit was canceled. No apology, no explanation. Just a quiet retreat. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came 3 days later, when Leah opened the front door and found a manila envelope on the doorstep. Inside were photos, dozens of them all, of Sophia, different men, different cities, different years, proof of a pattern, affairs going back long before Frank's illness, trips labeled business conferences that were actually romantic getaways, receipts, hotel check-ins. Even one from the weekend after Frank's father's funeral, while he mourned alone, she had been in Bali. There was no name on the envelope, no note, just one Polaroid. Sophia and Phillips arguing violently in a parking garage. The timestamp? The night before the wedding. Frank stared at it, unmoving. The person who sent this wasn't trying to help. They were trying to destroy. Frank sat at the cabin table, the photos scattered in front of him like shattered glass. Leah stood nearby, silent, waiting for him to speak, but for 10 minutes he didn't. He kept looking at the Polaroid. Sophia, mid-yell, her hands balled into fists. Phillips leaning against a car, smirking, until her hand hit his chest. Her mouth open, mid-scream. It wasn't affection. It wasn't seduction. It was war. You think she sent this? Leah asked gently. Frank shook his head. No, she wouldn't. Not unless she was desperate. This is someone trying to light a match under both of them. He gathered the photos and dropped them into a box. If there was one thing he knew after months of betrayal, it was that truth had no mercy. And whoever took these photos wasn't offering redemption. They were offering destruction. He received the second message that night. A new number, a simple line. Still think she was your biggest problem? Frank didn't reply. But he knew now. Phillips wasn't just a parasite. He was a leech that sucked dry everyone who came near him, including Sophia. Whatever she'd done, and it was a lot, Frank was beginning to see that she might not have been in control as long as he'd thought. The next day, his lawyer called. We found it, Ronan said. The secondary mortgage Phillips took out with your forged signature. He moved it through a shell company tied to a tax haven in the Caymans. Sophia's name is nowhere on the application, but she's on the approval form. That makes her complicit, if we push. Frank rubbed his temple. What happens if we expose that? They both go down. Fraud, perjury, money laundering if we're lucky. And if we don't? Ronan paused. Then you walk free, quiet, but they'll still be out there. Frank stared out the window. The trees were frozen. Still. But the air had changed. I'm ready, he said. Do it. But fate didn't wait for the court date. 2 days later, Frank got another alert, this time from a local news site. Breaking. Man found unconscious at Midtown condo, suspected overdose. The image attached was blurry, but the figure on the stretcher, pale and lifeless, was Phillips. Frank blinked. For a moment he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just inevitability. He didn't call anyone, didn't ask if he lived. He simply went for a walk, for hours, until his phone rang again. This time it was Sophia. He hesitated, thumb hovering, over the screen, then answered. Her voice was raw, cracked. Frank, I heard, he said flatly. He took everything from me, she whispered. He emptied the trust, my savings. I didn't even know until the bank called. He drugged himself when I tried to confront him. I didn't know what to do. You married him, Frank said. I was afraid, she whispered, of being alone, of losing the life we built. And he made me feel needed. Frank stood still in the woods, snow beginning to fall around him. So did I, he said quietly. She broke, sobbed through the phone. I was wrong, about all of it. I thought I could have both, the comfort of you and the thrill of him. But all I did was destroy everything. You didn't destroy me, Frank said. I did that to myself, by trusting someone who gave up on me the moment I became inconvenient. I'm sorry, she whispered. He stayed silent. I'm not asking you to come back, she said after a while. I know that's over, but can you forgive me? Not for me. Just so I can breathe again. Frank exhaled slowly. No, he said softly. But I don't hate you anymore. Sophia's breath caught. I hope that's enough, he added, then ended the call. That night, Leah walked into the cabin living room, finding him staring at the fireplace. She called. Frank nodded. Are you okay? He thought about that. I think I'm finally starting to be. The next week, the court sent a formal letter. The charges against Frank dismissed. Phillips, who survived the overdose, was facing federal investigation. Sophia was under quiet review for her involvement. Valeria Willoughby had hired a crisis PR firm and refused to comment. Frank did not celebrate. He did something else. He sent the medical bill to Sophia's email again. Same total, same note, but this time he attached a new message. You never paid the price, until now. Don't worry, your name's still on it. 3 months passed. The city moved on, as it always did. Scandals faded, names got replaced, and Sophia's drama fell out of rotation in people's feeds. But Frank remembered, not out of bitterness. He had long let go of that. He remembered because it was proof. Proof that survival wasn't just breathing. It was choosing who deserved. The air around you. Frank never saw Phillips again. After the overdose, Phillips was admitted to a court-mandated rehabilitation program. But the fraud charges stuck. Bank records, fake signatures, offshore accounts, they had him dead to rights. His bail was denied. The headline said it all. Heir of Langston Holdings to face grand jury for multi-million-dollar fraud. As for Sophia, she didn't appear at the hearings. She quietly signed over what was left of her financial estate to avoid being indicted. What little influence? She had vanished overnight. One morning, Frank received a letter, handwritten, from Sophia. Frank, I've moved to a smaller place. I've sold most things that didn't matter. Turns out that was almost everything. I don't know what to do now, but I'm trying to live honestly. For what it's worth, I do still dream of the way you looked at me when we bought our first place. The way you used to laugh when I burned toast and blame the toaster. I know you'll never come back. But if someday you feel like I've changed enough to deserve forgiveness, you know where to find me. Sophia. He folded the letter once, then dropped it into the fire. Forgiveness wasn't a place she could reach anymore. Frank had already found peace elsewhere. Leah, the woman who never once raised her voice, who never played power games or masked truth behind perfume and curated smiles. The woman who, without asking for anything, offered him back to himself. They lived quietly in Vermont, just outside the main town. Frank resumed small projects, helping, rebuild bridges, repairing homes after the last snow season. He worked with his hands again, his strength returned. So did his laughter. He never posted on social media, never checked his old accounts. He no longer needed the digital proof of his existence. One day in spring, he sat on the porch beside Leah, sipping coffee as the wind stirred the trees. You ever think about going back? She asked. To the city? She nodded. He smiled faintly. No. Everything I needed to say has already been said. She looked over, resting her hand on his. Even to her? I didn't leave anything unsaid, Leah. That's the part people get wrong about closure. They think it has to come from a conversation. He paused. But it doesn't. Sometimes closure is just watching someone beg and feeling nothing at all. A week later, a final letter arrived. This time, from the hospital. A notice of payment. The entire balance of $137,211.97 had been cleared. Paid in full, from Sophia Willoughby. Frank stared at the page. He didn't smile, didn't sigh. He folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer beneath a wooden photo frame. The picture inside was new. It wasn't of him and Sophia. It was him, Leah, and a boy. 6 years old, freckled, missing his 2 front teeth. Leah's nephew. The son of her late sister, now under their shared custody. That boy had once asked him, "Are you my real dad now?" Frank didn't answer then. He just hugged him. Now, he finally could. Yes, because sometimes you get to choose the family you fight for. He closed the drawer, stepped outside. The sun had just started to set, streaking the sky with soft orange and muted rose. The same shade Sophia once wore as lipstick when she said she'd never leave him. He didn't regret loving her, but he would never, ever let her in again. Some debts are paid in dollars, others are paid in silence, and the ones that matter most are paid in full.